Thank you, and welcome everyone to the April 30th edition of the Quaranteam Chats. Um, as usual, we're going to run through some updates that we've heard in the news about the latest programs and efforts around the COVID crisis. We're going to go through some top tips, this time around HR and recruitment, around pivoting your business, and we'll do a deep dive lesson into that. This is a Q&A format, so everybody who has joined us online, get ready with your questions. We're gonna open up the microphones at a few points. Feel free to write them into the chat box or into the Q&A panel. So if you mouse over the Zoom screen, either at the top or at the bottom, you should see a Q&A section or a chat box, and you can type those things here. We do typically pause for a minute to answer questions live as they come in. And for those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live, really glad to have you. And also for you who are watching on YouTube after the fact, please try and join us online. You're welcome to come in. There's no registration required, just very easy to join. If you navigate to www.entreflow.com, you'll find a link right on the homepage of our website. You can jump on in. These discussions are best when we have lots of people participating, answering their questions, so that it's not just us talking. Speaking of us, here's us. So I'm Iain Rogers. Many of you may know me as the founder of Entreflow. Helena is my co-founder and partner. She's not on the line just yet, but she might be able to jump in, so I put her face up there so you know who she is. Bronwen is our practice manager. We've got a partner joining us from Payment Evolution. Dustin is a regular star on the show. And today we're also very pleased to welcome Brian Thompson, who's the founder of RecText and also a long time and well-known recruiter in Vancouver and perhaps across North America. Welcome, Brian and Dustin, to the call. Can you just say a few words to introduce yourself so that that people know who you are on the line? Why don't you go ahead first, Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Iain. So I think you summed it up well. I'm a recruiter by trade. I've been doing it for 14, 15 years now. And I've always been mostly involved in tech recruitment in Australia, New Zealand, and here in Canada and Vancouver specifically. But I've also dabbled in other areas of recruitment as well. And about a couple of years ago, myself and a co-founder started a recruitment technology company called RecText, which is a text recruiting software platform specifically for recruiters to use. So it allows recruiters to text and communicate with their candidates through text in a more efficient and better way than using their personal cell phone.
That sounds great. That's a good summary. Thank you. And as we all move into through the COVID crisis and into the recession that follows, and we're thinking about pivoting our businesses, I'm sure it'll be really useful to get your insights about talent acquisition and how we think about and change talent on our team to adapt. So thank you very much for joining. Dustin, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Dustin Meneses. I'm the Senior Manager for Business Development and Sales here at Payment Evolution. Payment Evolution, the first cloud payroll solution out in Canada. I've been around for about 13 years, and we've been doing some really crazy stuff, some really cool stuff, but a lot more around the COVID-19 crisis. We're providing in our application the ability to do things like the temporary wage subsidy, as well as the Canadian emergency wage subsidy reports that are necessary to help our friends and our clients and all businesses and SMBs out in Canada that are being affected by this stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, and making sure that people get paid and are engaged is, of course, really important to that HR strategy too. Bronwen, can you introduce yourself, say a couple of words about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Entreflow for about 3 years now, working in the HR department or working with the HR team here, providing HR management consulting services as well as recruitment services to small and medium-sized businesses, mainly in the manufacturing and tech, but worked with many different industries across kind of the whole board there.
Sounds good. Thank you. And we do have, it sounds like Colin has joined us. I wonder, Aislinn, if you can promote him to a panelist so he can introduce himself.
I am.
Hi, Colin.
Hey, Ian. Good morning.
Good morning. So we're very pleased to have the support of Startup Vancouver and by extension Startup Canada in support of these Quaranteam chats. And so Startup Vancouver is a co-presenter of these Quaranteam chats. Colin, can you give us a taste of what Startup Vancouver does and what you're all about?
Absolutely. So we're here to collaborate and to partner, and that's exactly why we jumped on board with what you're doing with Entreflow with Quaranteam chats. Just love what you're doing, and I just reached out to you, Ian, and said, "Come on, we got to collaborate on this so we can help amplify your signal across the country through the power of Startup Canada." So those that don't know out there, you entrepreneurs, Startup Vancouver is one of over 50 community chapters across the country and growing. We've got 9 in BC right now. So our why and our purpose for all you entrepreneurs is to connect you to all the resources, events, other people, and tools, both here locally, regionally, and nationally. So we're here as a volunteer-based group of entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs to help you succeed.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And speaking of sharing the love, you'll notice that we're putting up posts on social media, hashtag Quaranteam chats. And so make sure you follow us online or follow Startup Vancouver online and share those posts out. These chats are offered as a service to the business community. We're really happy to be here answering questions and helping people through as they move their businesses through this troubling times. So share the love and we'll get lots more people on here, answer lots more questions and help lots more people. Just a quick note about us. This isn't about us, but it helps to have a little background on who we are and why we're doing this. So Entreflow's mission is to support emerging companies, early growth stage companies and startups with people, processes, and systems that they need to crush their goals. We're really about inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs in Canada. We do that by offering services, and specifically that's CFO and accounting services. So we're a licensed public practice accounting firm. We also offer HR services in terms of HR manager service and some light recruiting. And we do a little bit of marketing work as well, and that's my background. But let's get into the news. So first of all, we covered this on Tuesday, but as of Monday, April 27th, the wage subsidy for Canadian businesses, CEWS, CEWS or CEWS, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is open. So that means that you can sign into your CRA My Business account, talk to your accountant or use the web forms, and you can submit and apply for the wage subsidy. This can be a game changer for a lot of businesses. So if you haven't talked to your accountant, if you haven't explored this, please do so now. Figure out the eligibility requirements and make sure that you can apply and then go ahead and do it. They will be asking for, we've done this for a few of our clients, they're going to be asking for details on your payroll, how much you paid people and in what pay periods, etc. So make sure and have that ready to go. You should be able to pull that out of Payment Evolution or your accounting software. If you're having trouble with that, do speak to those providers and should be able to get you the information that you need. What we know at this point is that they're not specifically asking for the backup information or documentation to show that you are qualified or eligible based on the revenue drop that they were looking for, but they have made it very clear that you need to keep really strong records and documentation for this, because they're going to be chasing people who they think are submitting fraudulent claims. So don't submit fraudulent claims. Do make sure to keep all the backup documentation that you can, and don't fiddle with the numbers, okay? All right. Next thing we covered earlier in the week, but we have a couple more details, is the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. I'm calling it KECRA because the other one is too much of a mouthful. So again, this is to cover rent in April, May, and June, retroactive. They're expecting the program to be fully up and running in mid-May, so funds will flow, and they should be retroactive payments. Here's the details. They're going to pay no more than $50K per month of gross rent per location. It's eligible to companies that have 20 million in, or less than 20 million in consolidated revenue and ceased operations, or at least a 70% decline in revenue, to be compared year over year. These were Bronwen's notes, so I probably muddled that. Can you jump in and correct me?
No worries. So it's actually for the pay no more than $50,000 per month gross rent per location is an eligibility requirement for the businesses.
See. Okay.
Yeah. So from what I was able to collect, there's still more information to come on exactly what this program is going to look like. But it is saying that it's coming in a loan format versus kind of a direct deposit payment into your bank account like the wage subsidy is. So I know that we have a question here asking if the loan needs to be paid back. I'm to be honest, I'm not totally sure at this point. It's a little bit unclear, but they are expecting to kind of provide more information over the coming weeks. So we'll keep you updated as much as we can on that one.
Yeah, I did hear that some of it is meant to be forgivable.
Yeah.
So we just don't have the details on it yet. I guess we can expect more in a couple weeks on the exact details there. Okay, next item is that the BDC did finalize their co-lending program. You may remember, if you were part of these chats from early on, that this was something that was announced pretty much right away, is that the BDC, through their credit availability programs, would be providing funds through another commercial bank. So if you can go to your commercial bank to apply for the loan, then the BDC would top things up. So that was announced. It's been working through process, and they've finalized that program. So we've got the link in here if you're interested in that. This essentially just means it's not that there's more money available, at least my reading of it. It's just that the BDC is really kind of swamped with requests. They can't handle all of them. They're really focused on companies that they're already dealing with as much as they can, and new applicants they're dealing with, but they're sort of in the queue. This allows commercial banks to serve their customers even better, providing more funds than they would normally have available. Loans up to $6.2 million or something like that. So for most people on the call, I'm sure that'll be more than enough. Check it out, see if that's something that can help you out. All right, next item, we talked about the IRAP Innovation Assistance Program. Those applications are closed. So if you didn't get the application in, too late now. But if you did, then you can expect that around May 11th, I think the date was, that funds should start coming through here. Let me just check if I have that. Yeah, May 11th is the date there. We have an update on the CERB. For self-employed and independent workers. Bronwen, I think you had the detail on this. Can you fill us in?
Yeah, so there's just a little bit of an adjustment to the eligibility requirements for business owners. So they're allowing you to consider in expenses that need to be paid towards business expenses, from what I can understand. So before it was just that So if you are making money in order to be able to pay for expenses in the business, you're able to kind of take that into consideration in your calculation so that you are eligible still for the CERB. So the $1,000 a month, I believe, was the previous requirement in order to be able to work and collect from the CERB. It's a little bit different for self-employed and independent workers.
Okay, sounds good. We got a question on the line about when can you apply next for the CERB. I don't have an answer for that off the top of my head, but I'll see if we can get that while we're chatting here.
Yeah.
Okay. So Bronwen, if you can try and find that out, I'll cover the next couple of points. So this may not be a new announcement, but it just came across my awareness as of yesterday, is that there's a career ready program, a 70% wage subsidy that's paid to companies who are hiring students. So it seems to be in addition to other programs like the Get Youth Working program and the Canada Summer Jobs program. It seems to be in addition to that. So looks like you can go immediately to this link here, itactalent.ca, to pre-qualify. So do that first in advance of thinking about hiring somebody. Then as soon as you hire, then you can formally apply to the program, and funds will be paid after the fact. So probably not something that's useful for companies that are really tight on cash right now, but certainly something to help general cash flow as we come through the summer.
Hey, Iain, one other piece on that you may be able to stack on top of this, of course, with our friends at New Ventures BC, whether it's Angie or Michaela over there, we should ask about their ISI program, which is their Hire a Student program.
Mm-hmm.
So up to $5,000 per student. So up to $10,000 in the year, they'll match up to 50% of that. You may be able to stack this one with this and may be able to get a student for free with that. Because I know what they're offering with ISI is stackable. So Bronwen, I don't know if you're connected with Angie or Michaela over there, but that's worth asking about too, because that could be extremely lucrative. As I know ourselves with our business, we fall into that too. So I'm going to be inquiring. And if you don't hear, I can circle back on Tuesday and give you an update on that too. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. And if you do have a second, Colin, if you can find any details on that, if you could paste that into the chat while we're chatting, that would be really great.
I'll do that now.
Okay. Next item up is MyTax. If you don't know about the MyTax program, they've been around for quite a while, and they basically, if I can sum it up, provide funding for collaboration between academics and industry. So it may be that there's a research project that academics are trying to do and want or need the cooperation of a company, and they will fund typically 50% of that kind of project. And there's an application process and everything, but they've now increased that to 75%. So basically more money for innovative research projects, and we provided the link over there. If you haven't checked out MyTax, it's a good program. They fund projects and they also fund staff as well. So if you're going to hire, say, a postdoc or something to do research and development work within your company, they can cover most of those wages as well. So check them out. A really good option for companies doing that. And last but not least is Shopify. So I just got this news. So Shopify Capital has been around for a little while. I think it was 2016 that they initially launched, but they only put it out in the States, if I've got the history right. They've now done two things. One, added another $200 million to their fund and made it available in Canada. At least that's what they announced. So I don't know if all the administrative hurdles are through, but the point is to fund basically e-commerce businesses or any kind of business that's selling online and could conceivably have a Shopify storefront. Then it seems that they've got some funding available to those kind of people. So a lot of people on the call I know have asked about e-commerce, selling online, what they can do, and it's certainly an option to consider to sweeten the deal, essentially, if you're thinking about selling online. All right, so at this point, I'll just pause and we'll just open it up to questions. Aislinn, if you could unmute the line so that way people can jump in with their questions, that would be great. And while we're doing that,
I do have a question here about the Career Ready program, and if it's available for international students from UBC.
Yeah, So I'd have to double check those specifics, but it did seem to be that those kind of students would be eligible as well. I didn't see any restrictions on their page about Canadian residency or anything like that. I think they would have to be eligible to work in Canada, but a lot of students have that ability to work part-time on their student visa, or to continue working after they're finished their coursework, so that they can stay in the country. So it should be available, and we can double check the eligibility criteria, but I think that's possibly an option there.
Yeah, and just make sure to be checking the requirements on the international student visas as well, to make sure that they are eligible to be able to work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And I see that you put in about the CERB, so we can apply every 4 weeks for the CERB to a maximum of 4 weeks. So that's great. And
so from your first submission date. So it would just depend on when the last time you submitted was.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. That's great. And then it looks like Colin's put in the New Ventures BC link into the chat. So if you didn't see that, check it out there. Do we have any other questions from on the line? Or any other news or any other programs that maybe we missed? Okay, well, let's carry on then. So Bronwen, over to you. I think this was your content. So go ahead, take us through some things that we might want to think about for recruitment.
Sure thing. Yeah. So just wanted to kind of touch on some top tips for your recruitment process, if this is something that you're starting to think about putting in place over the next couple of weeks here, with restrictions potentially starting to lift and needing to build up your team or hire different members of your team depending on how you're pivoting your business. So this is kind of in my head the 6 things that we recommend doing in your recruitment process. Number 1 is to make sure that you've got an engaging job ad. We like to pull on our awesome marketing team to see if they can help us with some SEO work. So some search engine optimization, if I got that right. And they will, so that they can just, make sure that we're highly searchable job ads online, especially now that Google Jobs helps through a lot of applicant tracking systems. You can actually kind of use that system there. You want to make sure that your job ad isn't just responsibilities and requirements, but maybe try and focus in on what makes your company special, what benefits they'll get out of joining the organization, and make it a little bit more exciting than, this is what your day-to-day is going to look like. We frequently hire accountants on our team, and have kind of stepped away from using the responsibilities for the job because most accountants are fairly familiar with what accounting jobs require. So we try to focus around more what makes us exciting and why people come and work with Entreflow. Next is a phone screen, just to kind of make sure that the person seems interested, and ask a couple quick questions, verify some things on their resume, set up some in-person interviews. We generally like to do 2, one right after the phone screen and one after step 4, which is skills test or psychometric testing. We like to have that second in-person interview just to review everything from the skills test and psychometric testing. And then kind of as long as the first 4 items there have gone well, they have a big check mark beside their name, move forward to criminal record check and reference checks. So this is kind of just our basic recruitment process. The next slide is all about unique additions, but I just wanted to see, Brian, is there anything that you would recommend adding into the recruitment process that's kind of missing from that first slide there?
It really depends on the skill set you're hiring. But generally speaking, that looks like a good approach. I would sort of blanket statement or advise that, every step of this recruitment process that you're designing, you really want to make sure that the candidate experience is top of mind. So if you've ever been looking for jobs or have been a candidate in the past, typically like those companies that you're hiring, that you're interviewing with, you like them more if they treat you better, right? So the companies that can move quickly, that are transparent with their communication, that are respectful, and that just in general terms offer a better candidate experience, are the ones that usually win when it comes to competition for talent. So for those steps there, yeah, those are good basic steps, and they should lead to success. Just make sure you do it with candidate experience in mind, and make sure. The other thing, even in this market, which is not as busy as it used to be, but you still want to maintain momentum and pace throughout the interview process, because the longer that an interview process goes on, the higher the chance of you losing that candidate that you've been wanting to hire.
For sure. Yeah, good point.
I have actually a question for Brian. Brian, I'm noticing that we're in a unique position here during this kind of weird landscape that we're in at Payment Evolution, where we're actually hiring a lot for sales, marketing, and an array of different things. My question is, I've noticed that with a lot of startups, depending on if you're in the SaaS landscape, I'm noticing that the recruitment process itself is quite long. And it's interesting that you're saying about the engagement process for that candidate. For our viewers, could you explain a little bit more, if that's on target, if having anywhere from 4 to 5 interview process, from initial, questions, phone screen, initial interview, second interview, and maybe a co-founder interview is really what I'm seeing very normal right now. Could you share if that's atypical, or if that is based on industry or so? For some of our viewers, sometimes it's great for them to realize some of this information, because sometimes the feedback that we're receiving is, oh, this seems a bit convoluted. We don't think it is, because we're going through the right steps to pick the right candidate, but we also want to be efficient and engage with that client, or engage with that candidate, in a very effective manner, and keep their experience in mind, as you're saying too.
Yeah, there is no right answer to that. What I would say is that it depends on the role. But as a general rule, again, just make sure that you move with momentum. If you do have a longer hiring process, like that's okay. But what I would recommend you do is set that up from the start in terms of expectations with your candidate. You can say, hey, look, our interview process looks like this, blah, 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 step 1, step 2, step 3. This is why we've decided to do it this way. Are you comfortable with that process? And of course, the candidate, if they're interested, they're going to say yes. But I think a lot of the time it's when those expectations from the candidate point of view aren't managed from the start. So it's okay to have a longer process. Just prepare your candidate for it in advance. And I would also ask them, I'd say, hey, our process is going to take, for example, 2 weeks to complete. If before the end of the 2 weeks, you're going to become unavailable or the situation may change, just tell me. Let me know. Here's my direct email address, so that I can pull strings or change things around so we can accommodate your timing better. That would be one recommendation. And the other thing I would say is, if you have, for example, 5 steps, think creatively of how you can compact them, and maybe get 2 steps done at the same time. If you have a candidate at final stage and you think they're looking really strong, and it's like, come back in again to meet with our CEO or our founder, see if you can sort of tack that on to the end of the in-person meeting that they have. So it's just like while they're already in the office, a quick office tour and 5 minutes or 10 minutes with the CTO or CFO, whoever it is. That can be another way to still have an in-depth hiring process, but in such a way that you're not going to lose candidates. You're not going to see the frustration that can come from a candidate perspective out of a longer interview process.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you so much for that. What I'm getting a lot of it is setting the expectation properly right from the beginning, and compact it where we can, so that it could be respectful of their time.
Yep.
Right. Let's jump into some ideas for how to handle recruitment in these changing times. So I think these are your ideas, Bronwen. Can you just take us through them, and maybe Brian, you can jump in with any others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had some unique additions that, I was looking around to see, especially with working virtually, how we might be able to, not maybe, if you're not able to have in-person interviews, like how do you how do you move forward with this? The video interviews can still be a little impersonal at times, even though you are able to see the person face to face. Sometimes it's still nice to be in the same room as the person that you're interviewing, and for the candidate as well to be in the same room as you. But I was kind of looking around and had some, we've tried in the past video responses. So instead of going straight into a phone interview, asking some questions about culture fit and having the candidate reply with a video response and saying, you've got 5 minutes to answer these questions and then submit your response. It was kind of cool to see those videos come in and there's only so much that you can gain from a resume, but to be able to see personality come through on videos was awesome. But, there's also a lot of people that are a little bit nervous about video responses. So I think it's really dependent on the position that you're hiring for. Some other suggestions that I've seen is employer branded videos and messages. So maybe on your career site, having some tour of the office with the employees and, showing where you work or where this person would be working and what the culture kind of feels like. I saw that there's I can't remember off the top of my head now, but there was a larger organization that's doing virtual reality meetings. So, using VR tech to have some meetings and do a walk around the office, virtual reality style. I thought that was pretty crazy. Their reasoning behind it was to show how advanced they are in tech, and the kind of cool things that they can do there and attract top candidates. And one of the other things I thought was kind of cool that I saw was voice recorded employee testimonials. So it's great to have, employee testimonials on Glassdoor or on your careers page, but to actually be able to hear the voice of the workers, maybe it's voice recorded or video recorded might be another option, so that they really get the sense of the people that they're working with. Words are great, but sometimes mannerisms and talking definitely adds a little extra layer to that. So those were a couple unique additions that kind of came to mind for me to help with that candidate experience that Brian was talking about.
All right, good stuff. Over to you, Brian. Do you have any other comments on other things that you're seeing or doing?
Yeah, those are all really good examples. Again, it comes down to the type of talent that you're looking to hire and attract. Some personalities and positions won't be so a video pre-recorded message, or it may not be comfortable for them. I did use, like, back when in its infancy, virtual video recording interview questions when I was at Lululemon a few years ago. And depending on the role, like if we were interviewing marketing type folk or community and branding folk that were pretty outgoing and spontaneous and comfortable in front of a camera, it worked fine. But we didn't roll it out to other positions that were in software development or those classical positions that were more of an introvert type of personality you'll find. So use your best judgment as to put yourself in the candidate's shoes and just feel like, well, what's going to make them feel most comfortable and be able to show who they truly are, because you may get someone nervous in front of a camera who in real life is really great and you'd want them in your team. So it's just a little sort of asterisk on that in terms of its effectiveness. One thing I'll add to that in terms of candidate experience and what can be done today is if there is a candidate that you're really excited about and you really want to close them and have them choose you over your competitor or another opportunity, or a counter offer that they may have if they resign for their current employer. Companies I've seen that have done this really well, they've actually got their CEO or someone in leadership involved, where they could, today in COVID times where you're at home, they could just do a little video saying, "Hey Bob, I heard you're interviewing with our team. We really want to hire you. It'd be great for us to see you in the office. When we're back in the office, cheers, I'm the CEO or the CTO or the CMO or the CFO." Just a little 30-second video that you can text to them or you can email to them. Like little touches like that, which don't cost a lot on the hiring side, can actually return on investment on something like that can be massive, right? So if you can imagine yourself as a candidate, go through the process and you're picking between company A and company B, and then you get a little video from the CEO of that organization saying, hey, heard you're awesome, would love to hire you, hope to see you in the office when, shake your hand, or give you a high five and in real life, that might make a difference, and it's just a really cool little tip that you can do quite easily. So
yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, because sometimes setting up an interview or getting time from the CEO to sit on a video interview even can be challenging in aligning schedules. But having just a quick video, I can see that would go a long way. Thanks for that, guys. Before we move on to the next section, just a couple of questions came in on the line, which I think I can answer quite quickly, so I'll just field them if you don't mind. So one was, can you explain how the criminal record check process is? So traditionally, that is, the candidate goes into the police station, requests their criminal record, and they receive it either there or in the mail, and then is able to provide it to you. We've got some tools that we use so that this process can be automated or done online. So you send the candidate a link and they're able to just step through that process themselves online and get their criminal record check within 24 hours, right? Right, Bronwen?
Yeah, some of them can be as quick as, I've had some with like 10-minute turnarounds.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are fast. It should be very easy, but it's an important step, especially for sensitive roles. Not all roles or all companies might require a criminal record check, but some companies have that as a policy. Everyone has to have it, and certainly some roles always should. We had a question about the BC one-time payment of $1,000 if you're eligible for CERB. So that is opening up May 1st. So look for that next week. So if you've qualified for CERB, you should be able to apply for that and get $1,000 from the BC government into your bank account next week. We don't have any further details on that yet, but I'm sure next week we can cover that off. All right. So these were some questions that Brian and I exchanged over email beforehand. So I'll just pose them to you here, and then we can just sort of chat through. So the context here is companies are considering changing how they're doing their business, pivoting, going after new markets, potentially releasing new products, just generally changing a lot of things in their business. And we've covered a little bit of that from a marketing perspective and a finance perspective. From HR, how should these small and large pivots be approached? What's your thinking on that, Brian?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll just preface my answer by saying I identify myself as a recruiter and not an HR professional. I think traditionally recruitment and HR were lumped into one. What we've seen is recruitment's become its own thing, and HR is still a really strong business partner. But imagine a recruiter being more of a marketer and a branding specialist, and someone that's really thinking more about the candidate experience, just like someone in the marketing team would think about customer experience. But I'm still very closely connected to the HR community, and a lot of the conversations, it's like a Venn diagram where it's like a recruitment and HR definitely overlap. But yeah, in terms of what we're seeing in the market, again, my lens is more from a knowledge worker perspective. So the lens I look at is what could also be known as like white collar workers. And so there's going to be different impacts depending on the industry and the type of talent or professional. But in terms of pivoting, we're not seeing huge pivots in terms of how companies are approaching their talent and hiring. Like nothing major. Like I've spoken to a few HR leaders over the last couple of days just to bounce sort of this question off them as well. Nothing significantly major in terms of pivots, but we're seeing many pivots, and we're seeing, I think the biggest one, especially in the knowledge worker space, is the fundamental shift in the perception of remote work. So, before COVID happened, there weren't too many companies that were comfortable or knowledgeable about how to have a work from home workforce. And then COVID happened, and still happens today. And, by force of nature, we all have to be working from home today. And so a lot of leaders and organizations have realized that, hey, we can still run our business really well. Our employees are still happy. And, maybe, this can work. It has to work. And obviously the tech needs to be installed in an organization to make remote work happen. But how that affects like hiring strategy, for example, is, companies that have and we have, I do some work at an agency right now, and we have some companies that have traditionally not been friendly to remote workers. Now they're suddenly saying, you know what, we are open to remote workers. And what that means for them is they will have a broader access to a broader talent pool. So, if you're looking for a software developer, and historically you've always wanted someone to come into the Vancouver office every day, now you can hire someone from Toronto, for example, that has that skill set and may be more readily available. So in terms of pivots on the hiring side, that's one of the major ones I've seen, is just the openness to hire candidates from all over the world, or North America or Canada, whatever the geography is, whereas historically that wouldn't have been such an option.
Mm-hmm. Bronwen, do you want to jump in on that from a HR manager perspective?
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Maybe we're sort of ahead of the game on this question, where people are trying to affect pivots and changes and not really restructuring their teams just yet. Do you feel like this question is a bit early, or are HR managers planning this right now, and changes will come soon? What do you think?
I think there's probably a little bit of both. We've got organizations that, especially those that have been helping out the Canadian government with, personal protective equipment, for example, that have pivoted their businesses to be able to help out our healthcare workers. It's not going to be a huge pivot for the employees, but it could be as simple as just learning a new way of doing things. If you're switching from distilling spirits, for example, and now you're making hand sanitizers, there might be a little bit of a process change for you. So it's not going to be, I think, a huge pivot necessarily on the team, but there might be some skills that need to be built up, especially like Brian said with the virtual working. That's not, we've talked about it at great lengths, I think, in previous weeks, but it's not always an easy transition. So just the skill of how to organize yourself while virtual working is something that, HR managers need to be sure that I think their employees are supported for that pivot. I think that there's probably some more that are going to be coming down the pipeline as we continue on the next couple months here, especially as we start to hear what the restrictions lift looks like. You're going to maybe changes to technology in the restaurant industry so that there's contactless payments, or I think that it's more going to be a knowledge shift and skills learning than anything there.
Okay, so if I can distill down what you're both saying, it sounds like we should not, or at least we are not. I don't know if I should put the judgment on should, but generally companies are not making large or sort of big structural changes in how their organizations are organized, and they're not making big shifts in acquiring new talent. They're trying to deal with the new opportunities with the existing team and preferring to upskill and retrain versus trying to go out and get new talent. Is that sort of fair to say?
I would say, yeah, for the most part. I would say if you were to say the biggest shift for, I guess, especially the HR professionals and the HR group within an organization, if they are large enough to have an HR group, is that there's a whole I mean, the majority of companies have had to do layoffs or furlough their workers.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's a whole nother workforce that is the furloughed workforce that historically hasn't been a big part of, on the landscape for an HR professional. So today there's a whole workforce that's not actually working, not at the office, but are still technically employees of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
That HR professionals and HR teams and business leaders should really be careful not to forget about, because the intention of those furloughed workforce, those workers, is for them to come back. And so, when things turn around in the economy, the ability to bring those back, those furloughed workforce back into the organization is really important. So we want to make sure, and this is coming from a bit of a personal story with use of our software that we're building. So RecText is a recruitment tool. But what we found, and just talk about the keyword of the day being pivot, like we ourselves are exploring like a mini pivot where our customers, who are recruiters and HR professionals, have actually started to use our text messaging software for internal communication with their furloughed workforce, because it's sort of almost the same thing. Like our platform is versatile that we didn't know about it, but it just, and so since then I've spoken to a number of HR leaders, and it hasn't been a challenge that the HR has to really work through in modern history as it is now. So I think there's something there about how do you continuously engage and nurture those relationships with your furloughed workforce so that they are that they're informed, that they stay connected to your brand, they stay loyal to your organization, so that you can keep a pulse on who's still available. If you had to, for argument's sake, say, hey, we've got to hire everyone back next week, who's found another job? Like, who's been snapped up by your competitors? So there's this whole workforce that I think HR needs to really look at and go, how do we keep this workforce engaged and nurtured, and operate the business as we normally do? Because you might see some organizations sort of assuming that their workforce is going to come back when times are good, but then realize, oh crap, everyone's not coming back, and now we've got to hire, and we weren't prepared for this. We didn't think that we'd lose 30% of our staff during the COVID times, and so that's just one thing I would flag to the HR community and business community. That's a really important workforce you don't want to forget about.
Yeah, and I think that kind of the next step, it kind of goes into the next two questions ahead here. We're talking about defining new roles. I think that bringing back those furloughed employees when it comes time is a great opportunity to have conversations with them about their position that they were in previously, and whether or not there's many pivots within their job description that can be changed so that they're enjoying their job a little bit more. Maybe there was something that they really weren't loving that they were doing, and you can start to adjust the job descriptions with all those the new people coming back, and that's kind of a great opportunity to re-engage everybody in the organization and in their position and in the goals for the year.
Well, tell us how you're thinking about that, Bronwen. If there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So there may be we need X, like we need somebody who's really good with security, online security, right? That wasn't a thing before for us. We need it, but there's a lot of uncertainty. How do you go about creating a role for somebody where normally there's like this much defined and this much sort of gray area to figure out in the role, and now we're like, well, there's this much defined and this much gray area. How do you go about defining that role, maybe for an existing person coming back or for just going out and sourcing new talent? I
guess my first thing I would want to figure out is whether or not it's going to be a full-time shift or kind of like a interim part-time shift, just for, is it a small project that this person's going to be working on to help with the online security setup for everybody working from home or virtually, and then they're going to be able to return back to their usual position? Or is it going to be a full-time, every day, hours a day where they're going to have to be focusing in on this. And if that's really unclear, you know, being as candid as possible, I guess, with your employee would be my first step. And second of all, trying to write the job description in a way that you've got a little bit of flexibility around it, but not too much, because, you know, obviously, as soon as there's any sort of change to, you know, large material change to any job description, you want to go back and have them re-sign off on a change letter. So yeah, that's a great question. It's really, it really depends on kind of what the person's changing from in their position, and, you know, how long, and yeah. Talk to your HR manager. Take it case by case.
Maybe that's the ultimate answer, is it's case by case, and write it down, and write down the things that they're willing to do and not willing to do. So at least you have some parameters for that. That's really great. Let's move through a few examples here. So these were examples I came up with, so I'll just throw them out there. Jump on it if you have some more insight into here. But some of these we talked about in terms of pivots on Tuesday's call, but we didn't talk about the HR implications. So just sort of revisiting them. So with Parallel 49, of course, a brewery locally famous here in Vancouver, and they switched to producing hand sanitizers. So HR implications that I thought of there are that they're, you know, probably a small change in processes that they need to do, but also they're having to sell to government now and to healthcare agencies and stuff, which is very different from selling to bars and to liquor stores. So there's probably some changes or new skills that they need to develop on the team for that. So that was my thinking there. Anything else to add?
Nope. I think we're good there.
Okay. Well, just jump in if you've got anything, if I'm missing anything. But so we covered the Welks General Store example. So they're a community general store. They sell basically everything, and they really relied on community engagement. They're very well known face-to-face interactions. They went online. They posted things on Facebook. They set up on e-commerce. They engaged with the digital community. So a couple of HR changes they've had to, I'm assuming, haven't done the case specifically, but I'm assuming they've had to lay off their in-person store staff and store managers. And so they've had to deal with that, maybe a furloughed workforce there, as Brian was mentioning. And then they've got a new need for digital skills. Maybe they had a little bit of it before, but now they've opened up this huge channel. So they have to be able to manage that online. And they probably didn't have a full-time marketing manager or something to deal with that. So maybe that's a hire that they've had to make. Or maybe the owners themselves have had to upskill and maybe hire some contractors to manage pieces of it. So just some thoughts there. We covered this company, the 3D printing for education. They provide 3D printers for schools and programs so that kids can learn how to make stuff in 3D printers. They switched to producing personal protective equipment. So the little brainstorm I had here is that, again, probably they're now dealing with government and healthcare authorities' procurement processes, whereas they didn't before. They now have to deal with regulations and standards on medical equipment. And I'm sure there's testing and stuff involved in that too. So probably they've had to hire or upskill on that. And I'm almost certain that they've increased the size of their team. They're growing. So there may be some new roles and new people structures on their team that they've had to adapt to. The last one is we covered Spiffy. So this was the detailing service, vehicle detailing, and they switched to disinfecting facilities for businesses and locations that still need to stay open during the COVID crisis. So they're probably using their existing team, but they probably are using new cleaning products, new checklists and inspection procedures, etc. So this is probably a small shift for them, just rolling out a few new things and doing a bit of a training program. But I'm guessing they're probably hiring a few more people to execute on this as well. So they're probably recruiting. All right. We're coming up to time, so I'll leave it open there for other comments on other things around HR. So Aislinn, while can you open up the lines? We just got a few more minutes for Q&A. So if you can open up the lines, and anyone on the line can ask or answer any question that they might have. And meanwhile, I'm wondering if Dustin or Brian or Bronwen or Colin, if you've got any examples of pivots in businesses that you've seen, and what the impact on HR were for those things. So let's start with Dustin. I'm picking on you.
Yeah, no problem, Ian, no problem. And so there are a couple of things that we're seeing with pivots when it comes to HR with a lot of our clients. For those who understand what we do, so we're a core online payroll application that happens to do some HR benefits and things of that nature. We shared it in a prior Quaranteam chat that we're noticing that a lot of organizations are starting to become a little bit more creative with their ability of providing some benefits, like almost like an Amazon Prime. I guess it's like a subscription to their employees, which is really helping people to, the people who are getting that know that they're going to be most likely retained for the next little bit. So there's a little bit of easing of mind when it comes to our current landscape. But another pivot that we're seeing big things happening is people needing to get to the cloud to begin with. Now, this might sound funny to those who are already here with us, who are maybe very savvy to begin with, tech savvy and in the cloud already. But we've been seeing a huge shift as to how important payroll is for a company, HR is for a company, and on top of that, how important engaging with your employees has been. So anyways, those are the big pivots that we're seeing right now, from my experience. I'm sure there's many more, as we've been kind of explaining already. But at the end of the day, I think it's more critical than ever to be focused on our teams and understanding where we are, because of the need of increased communication. And this is only a byproduct of all of that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dustin. Brian, do you have a favorite pivot or an example of a pivot that you could share?
I can talk about the company that I founded, Rectex, and
go for it.
It's more of a customer-led pivot where we discovered that we're relatively new to the market, but some of our early adopter customers have advised us that they're using it. They're not recruiting right now for obvious reasons, but they need to communicate more with their workforce, and text message is a great way to do it. There are so many different SaaS messaging apps out there, and there are so many different types of workers with different levels of technical sophistication, but everyone can text. Everyone has a phone. Everyone can, even my grandma can send and receive text. So what's been interesting, we're exploring our own pivot, and we're in the HR tech space, and it's opened up our eyes a little bit to think, well, our product's great for hiring and attracting and engaging with candidates, but now we're based on following the needs of our existing customer base and sort of predicting the future. It's opened our eyes to think, well, how can we just potentially do some small modifications to the usability and just the UI and the UX of our product, so that it's also internal facing communication, that HR leaders or HR professionals can essentially have conversations with their workforce via text message. So we're going through our own mini pivot right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how many companies are pivoting for us, temporarily, and then once things go back to normal, they'll pivot back to what they were doing before, which was successfully, and how many companies are going to be changed forever because of the lessons they learned, or just the the different use cases for their technology that comes out of a different economic and work environment. So interesting to watch.
Sounds good. I had one brief example of a company that they're in the life sciences space, and their sort of mini pivot was creating a technology that will be useful to companies that are doing COVID kind of research, but also a lot of other applications. And so their mini HR pivot or slight change was to put one of their more senior sales reps actually in charge of the business development effort for that globally. And so I'm excited and interesting to see what happens for them. So little changes that we're starting to see. Bronwen, I'd love it if you had an example. Unfortunately, we're out of time. And I think you gave me some when we were preparing for slides anyway. So we'll leave it there. I've, as you can see, put everyone's contact information up on the slide. So if you have questions about payroll, Dustin's a great person to ask. If you have recruiting needs or need for rec text, check it out. It's a great little technology from what I can see, and ask Brian. And of course, if you need HR support for your business, then reach out to either myself or Bronwen. We can help you out. So just a little bit of housekeeping stuff. These sessions are recorded, so they'll be posted up on our website either later today or tomorrow. If you'd like to see that and get all the links that we shared in the slides, they should be available on our website. So again, go to entreflow.com. If you click on Business Insights Resources at the top, it should take you to all the links. Please do share with your business colleagues and peers who might benefit from this kind of content. And as always, appreciate everyone joining and asking their questions. These chats are best when everyone participates and can get their questions answered. So thank you very much for making this a part of your week. And a special thank you to Dustin, Colin, and Brian, and Bronwen for joining me online today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Bye for now.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.
Take care.